Hi, I'm Georgie Dickens, host of Stratospheric Leaders, the podcast where I get to have inspired conversations with extraordinary leaders from across capital markets. Join me to hear their game-changing strategies, the personal stories and powerful sound bites behind their stratospheric success. Every episode packed with wisdom, insight and real-world lessons, the stuff they simply don't teach you in business school. If you want to elevate your game and most importantly, those around you, this podcast is for you. Enjoy. You are in for a real treat with this episode because I had the pleasure of sitting down with Keyvan Mohajer, co-founder and CEO of SoundHound. Now, SoundHound is a voice and conversational AI company that isn't just riding the AI wave, but they are truly disrupting how we live, work, and interact with technology. Keyvan's entrepreneurial spark showed up early. In fact, it was just age 10. He started buying dough for the equivalent of $1, baking 100 mini breads and selling each for $1. Even then, 10 years old, he was 100xing his investment and learning the fundamentals of entrepreneurship, of buying power and creating value. And those early days also ignited a passion for technology and innovation. He dreamed at that early age of being a technical innovator, fascinated by AI, and he says his heart beat faster reading about AI and robots. Inspiration can come from anywhere, and he spoke to a single ant carrying a grain of rice larger than itself, refusing to give up until it succeeded, and also science fiction, which pushed him to ask himself, what exists in sci-fi? What exists in Star Trek that doesn't yet exist in real life? And how can we bring that into the world? Because that's where the real impact lies. Of course, building in uncharted territory means setbacks, skeptics, people who are going to tell you you're crazy. And it's in those moments he turns to his father's advice. Even when the data tells you you'll fail, it's tapping into that inner faith that's deep inside you that you'll succeed. And that faith has paid off. 20 years after founding SoundHound, the company now has a market cap approaching $7 billion, and its solution powers millions of devices from cars to TVs, and they process billions of AI customer service interactions across some of the largest global enterprise brands in the world. And when it comes to AI transformation, Keyvan says we are just getting started. Some say we're in a bubble. He says it's only the beginning. This isn't just an entrepreneur who sees the future, he predicts it. And a legacy Keyvan wants to have is creating value for the world. And I think we can safely say, based on his impact to date, he's well and truly on that path. Enjoy the conversation. So Keyvan, I am delighted to welcome you to an episode of Stratospheric Leaders. You are co-founder and CEO of SoundHound AI. I have done a lot of research on you, watched many videos, and there are so many, your story is fascinating. And I'm looking forward to the listeners hearing about the arc of the journey. How have you arrived to where you're at today? Before we start, I want to know what was your first ever paid job? So let's rewind for a few decades. First ever paid job, and what did it teach you about work and life?
Well, thank you for having me. I think I've always been an entrepreneur, which is not necessarily a good thing for everyone. And my first job that I remember that generated revenue was, I think I was around 10 years old, and I started a little business. So there was a kids' playground near my house, and I made a small bonfire next to the where kids played, and I made fresh mini breads and sold them to the kids. So I went to the store and bought fresh dough for let's say $1 equivalent, and then I made that to little tiny breads, and I sold each for $1 equivalent. So I kind of 100x'd my investments. So one dough became 100 breads, and it was quite successful. But the first thing I learned was that the concept of the buying power. So kids of that age usually don't have money in their pocket, but when they ran home and asked their parents for just $1 to buy fresh bread and have that kind of experience, most parents said, sure, here's $1 to go buy fresh bread. So the hit rate was high, and the parents that said no were eventually shamed to saying yes because of all the other parents that said yes. And ultimately, the most important lesson was you have to create value. And even though the value of a small mini bread by itself in a store is not as high as that dollar, the experience that I was delivering to these kids, first of all, to conduct a transaction at their age was fun. And then, you're playing, you're hungry, you smell the bread, and then getting fresh hot bread was an experience that was worth $1. Ultimately you have to create value.
I love that. You have to create value. And I'm curious, you said you feel like you've always been an entrepreneur, and one of your first recollections of it showing up was when you were 10 years old. Does entrepreneurship, does it run in your family? When you track back through the generations, is there a kind of a thread you can see?
Yeah, my dad was an entrepreneur. He was a civil engineer, and he started a company, and the idea of starting something from nothing just is so rewarding that I was always, drawn to it as a child and later on in life.
Okay, starting something from nothing. And so that 10-year-old, if you could have imagined, well, I suppose we dream as children. Children, like to daydream. What did you dream of becoming, and how far or close is that to where you're at now?
I always wanted to be a technical innovator, people like to pursue excellence, and then you get inspired by different figures, and for me it was the technical innovators that really spoke to me. I was fascinated by artificial intelligence. Even as a kid, my heart beat faster anytime I read about AI and robots and so on. And I liked entrepreneurship, so being a technical founder of a high-tech startup is very close to what I was dreaming about.
It's interesting, isn't it, where your heart beat faster, reading about AI, robots. Our body, it whispers to us, and if we tune into it, it tells us the things that ignite us and inspire us. And you said I was inspired by different figures. If we go back to that child who was dreamed of being a technical innovator, who inspired you? Who were you looking up to?
I've learned to learn something from anybody, different figures over the time have taught me different things. But it's interesting. I was thinking about what was a defining moment for me. And my biggest inspiration was actually a very small ant. And I was maybe 5-6 years old. I don't remember exactly how old I was. And in those days there was no internet. Kids only played in dirt. So I was playing in dirt. And I saw this ant that was carrying a grain of rice, which was bigger than its body. And I was like, first I was fascinated. How can you carry something bigger than you and heavier than you? And then it started to climb this big step, which looked very hard, and I just watched it go all the way to the top, and then didn't quite make it, just fell down. So the rice was in one place and the ant was in another place. Just when I picked it up again and tried again, and it fell again, and it tried again. I just watched this ant for like an hour, and it finally made it. And that was a defining moment for me because, it just didn't give up, and it finally succeeded. It just kept trying, and I thought if I can be that ant, I will succeed. My life is a struggle, and especially when you aim high, it's the path to success is really hard, and it's always like that. You try and it's not just about perseverance. The first time I told that story to my colleagues, it's perseverance, and if you just keep doing the same thing. There's a saying that, the definition of insanity is you keep trying the same thing and expect different results. Each time you do it differently, right? Each time you learn from what didn't work and you try again and you improve your approach. And each time you think this is it. I'm not randomly throwing darts and trying to get a bullseye. Each time I'm gonna get the bullseye this time. And this time I have to aim a little bit to the right. And when it doesn't work, you adjust. And that, I guess, my biggest inspiration was that little ant.
What an extraordinary story, and it's interesting because ants have so much to teach us, also about teammanship. There was a great video on, I think, Planet Earth that talked about ants that were in the middle of a fire or something was being flooded, and they all came together, this colony, and it was what becomes possible when you bring, when I said they all came together. So I love the fact that we can take inspiration from people, but we can also take so much inspiration from the system around us. And you said there, I spent an hour watching it. So I think often we're in the go, the busyness of life. And actually, if we slow down, nature gives us such valuable learnings.
Absolutely.
So any more ant stories? The ants, the more that have come up, or was it that one moment?
That was a good defining moment. Another person that inspired me was Charlie Chaplin. Again, as a kid, I watched these movies, and a movie that probably this generation doesn't watch at all is a movie called Modern Times. So
Okay.
really, probably one of the best movies ever made. What inspired me was that Charlie Chaplin, if you look at just the Wikipedia page for it, it says director, Charlie Chaplin, producer, Charlie Chaplin, main actor, Charlie Chaplin, writer, Charlie Chaplin. And that's not unusual. These days, like a lot of actors become producers and directors and writers. But if you go down, it said music, Charlie Chaplin. And he wasn't a musician, but he made the music. And he worked with people, with musicians, to help him bring his idea to life. And it was really good music. And just being well-rounded and being good at everything, understanding everything, not just outsourcing it, and being the best, that really inspired me. And as a founder CEO running a high-tech company, I try to understand everything. I try to be good at everything and work with people who are better than me. I'm involved in technology, I'm involved in fundraising, in business development, in recruiting, strategy, and I really find that inspiring.
There's a very senior leader I work with from a Wall Street firm, and one of her leaders, her leadership team, said she's an inch of an expert on everything. There's certain areas she can't be the expert, but she's like the inch of an expert. She could do everything if she needed to. And you said that it's about understanding everything. And isn't it interesting, again, where inspiration comes in so many different forms? And I haven't seen the Modern Times film, and I always go with recommendations. So that is going to be one that I will be watching. And we talked about inspirational figures, and there's people that have inspired us along our career. No one goes through the journey of life, professionally and personally, without the support, advice, and help of others along the way. What's been a piece of advice that you've been given on your journey that's stayed with you, and who was the individual that gave it to you?
Yeah, the number one advice I give is something I learned early on. Actually, I learned it myself. Is to not follow any advice unless, one, you understand it, two, you believe in it. Let me clarify that it's really good to seek advice, and you can learn from something and from anyone, and the more advice you seek is better. But don't blindly follow it, because no one knows your vision better than you. No one knows your situation better than you. And especially in the early days, when I was a young founder, there are a lot of uncle and aunt figures around you, and they always want to tell you what to do, and they mean well, right? You should do this, you should do that, And initially I was doing it, like either out of politeness or out of thinking they are wise and they're older and they are more experienced, and I followed some, and some of them were good advice, some of them were not. And I decided that I will seek advice. I will listen to anybody. If somebody starts talking to me, like if I'm going down the hall and our receptionist says, Keyvan, you should do this, I stop and I listen. And it's surprising how amazing ideas can come from anywhere. But I only follow an advice if I understand it and I believe that it's right. And that's the advice I give to others.
I love that. Oh, this is just so, honestly, these bite size here, it's don't blindly follow. I only follow if I understand it. And that sometimes means taking a pause. And you shared there, just because people are wiser and older doesn't mean that they necessarily have all the answers. And what I also heard you say is that but the best pieces of advice can come from anyone. Like the receptionist she may have observed something in your style or something so it's being open to different voices.
Yes, since you said that and we talked about movies, another thing that really inspired me was the very ending of Ratatouille. There's a movie Ratatouille.
Yes.
It's about this mouse that really wants to be a good chef, and he reads this book that says anyone can be a chef, anybody can be a good chef, and that's the beginning of the movie. And at the very end, it said not everyone can be a good chef, but a good chef can come from anywhere, right? So you could be a rat, and you can be a good chef, and like a good advice can come from anywhere. And when we were recruiting, initially, we were all Stanford grads, like we were hiring our friends and classmates from Stanford. But then I learned that really, really good people can come from anywhere. You don't have to be a Stanford grad. Some of our best people were self-educated in the middle of nowhere, and they're amazing engineers and amazing scientists, amazing leaders, and that level of diversity and looking under every rock, looking for gems, has been a source of success.
And it's being very intentional around doing that, isn't it? Because it's very easy to hire from, Stanford. Everyone is the intellectual horsepower of people. Let's be clear, it's like the 0.01%. And it's also, you mentioned the word there, diversity, the cognitive diversity. Diversity comes in so many shapes and sizes, but being really intentional not to always hire people that look and sound and are like you, but and being open to the fact it can come from anywhere.
Absolutely.
And I love what you shared there about the advice that you give, and what's a piece of advice somebody has given you specifically, and it could have been from childhood or more recently, but something that's really left an imprint on you.
I think there's something my dad said when the company was going through a very hard time, and this is many, many years ago, and I was talking to him, and the person was, "Oh, I'm so proud of you, and you have a company," and I was like, "But Dad, it's not going well," and rationally, my rational thinking is going to fail. And all the data points, as a scientist and engineer, I put the data points, and my prediction is that it's not going to succeed. And then he said, "But you forgot about something. You need to have faith. Sometimes all the data points tell you you're going to fail, but you need to have faith that you will succeed. And just have faith." And that helped me that day. And then it helped me the next day. And eventually it worked out. Eventually we succeeded. So I think it's important to be data driven. It's actually important not to rely on data when you're fighting the battle in front of you. You have to be data driven, but you need to have faith that you're going to win the war. And because and especially in entrepreneurship, statistically, you will fail, right? It's actually mind-boggling how all these rational people do something so irrational. Rational people, engineers, scientists, they start companies when you know that over 90% of the startups fail. And because they have faith that they will succeed, and then you get the success stories, and that brings more of the same people to do the same thing, and that's just amazing.
I've worked a lot with founder CEOs that have gone, that have done extraordinary things, and faith is such a common theme, this unwavering belief, and it's so infectious because it's it's when that faith is real, it's alive in your body. And I think there's such an energy field around us, and people can feel it, they can sense it, and it's that unwavering, like I can see the unmet future. And to your point, data is important, and that faith piece, that is just it's just such an important part of being an entrepreneur, because you said, there'll be failures, there'll be setbacks, there'll be speed bumps, there'll be, near misses, near death experiences. Like there's a lot on the founder journey, and there's such a resilience and a fortitude and a strength and a courage. But for me, I think faith is, and you can't buy it. Like it has to, you have to believe it. Like it has to come from that deep cellular, the deepest part of you.
Yeah, and it's important to balance long-term thinking and short-term thinking. Long-term, when you don't have enough data, you rely on faith and you rely on passion. And short-term, you have to be very analytical and execute. And having that balance is important.
It's interesting that your dad was the one that gave you the advice, because I'm often saying to my children, like, listen to this, like I'm speaking, wisely. And they're like, what do they have their earmuffs on? They're like, it's mum speaking. So clearly, what does she know? And then it's interesting because I look back and I think that was exactly what I was like with my parents. And actually, they were really wise. So there's a lesson here. Listen to our parents. You have been at the helm of your company for 2 decades. Is it around 2 decades? And in our conversation and the videos I watched as I was preparing for today, there is clearly such a love, and we've just said this, faith, a love, a passion, and enthusiasm for what you do. And there is still an energy spend. So I initially was like, how do you strike balance? But I've kind of backspaced on the word balance. I just don't think balance, there's trade-offs. And if you want to be the 0.001%, you can't operate in the middle of the bell curve and have all this free, an abundance of time. So how do you not burn out? How do you create sustainable success?
I keep my life simple, and I only subscribe my time to what's most important to me, which is my work and my loved ones. So I work 12 to 16 hours a day. And even when I'm not working, part of my brain is working, so it's always there. But I spend time with my family and loved ones, and I prioritize them. And I really enjoy my work. I think if you don't enjoy it, it's really hard to keep going. And I try to be efficient. You can spend 45 minutes to get 45 minutes of exercise. Or you can spend 3 hours to get 45 minutes of exercise. You can get ready, get in the car, drive somewhere, and get in, talk to people, and then exercise, and come back. And so I try to be the 45 for 45 as opposed to 3 hours for 45. So efficiency is a key theme.
I love that. There was I can't remember who I was speaking to recently, a leader. He said, I know I intentionally didn't choose to play golf, because it's family is really important to me, and actually the weekends, that's a whole chunk of time. So creating efficiencies, and when you think about, I'll just pivot here, moving into, how do you personally think about success? Because there are many successful milestones you've had, but how do you think about success, and the kind of the follow up to it? How's it evolved over time, assuming it has evolved?
So first we aim high, and then when we get there and it gets easier, we aim higher. And I tell my colleagues, if you're not humble, you're not aiming high enough. No matter how good you are, there's always a higher bar that you can raise the bar higher, and then at some point so that you become humble, because that's really challenging. And success has to be repeatable. You have to be able to set a goal, and then you have to have a process to achieve it. If it's not repeatable, it's not useful. It's luck. And the part that I feel is changing is that we are becoming better at it. We are becoming better at making success repeatable. And that when you ask, like, how has it evolved over time? just getting better at repeating success and setting the goal, getting there, and setting another goal, aiming higher.
I've just written a book that's out next month. It's called Raise the Bar, and it's one of the leaders I've worked with. That's his motto, right? Raise the bar. And you mentioned that, and there's always a higher bar. And he talks about incrementalism, he talks about raise the bar and then widen the gap, because you raise the bar and you're ahead of the competition. Now let's widen the gap. And that raising the bar, and sometimes it's incremental, I think, but it's always be aiming higher, always be pushing to move that needle. And when you think about, and I'm not going to say great companies, because I think great is, I'm going to go extraordinary, stratospheric. I love the word stratospheric. It's a word because for me it's that rarefied atmosphere where few people inhabit, and people get to the stratosphere. There's one thing getting there, but it's quite another thing staying there. So what do you think makes, I'm going to say, a stratospheric company?
So the obvious thing that comes to mind is great vision, great mission, great execution. But if I want to say it differently, is it provides value to all the entities that are connected to it, right? So a company has customers, has investors, has employees, has partners, has families of the employees, and these are all the entities that are connected to it. And a great company provides great value to all those entities. And if you do, then you last, right? There's no reason for you not to exist, right? And that's not always true. I mean, you could be a company that provides great value to customers, but not to its employees. Or you could be a company that is great for employees, but doesn't create value for the world, doesn't have a good product. And I think it's important to, it's a complex organization with all these entities connected to it, and just create value for all of them, and create great value for all of them. And that's what makes a great company that deserves to last a long time.
The word that came up for me listening to you is about consistency of approach. Like there's an equality in terms of the shareholders, whether shareholders, clients, employees, but service all entities extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
So that's what makes a stratospheric company, or that's what one of the defining features. What about extraordinary leadership? What does that look like to you in action?
Actually, I talk to my colleagues a lot about leadership, and some people come and say, make me the manager or make me the leader of this team, and they want to be promoted. And so this topic comes up in those conversations. And I think great leaders are chosen by their followers, not assigned by their superiors. So if you convince people that by following you, you will lead them to a good place, they will follow you, even if they don't have to follow you, right? So you can be the leader of your peers because they know by following you, you will lead them to a good place. And if you don't show them that, even if people have to report to you, they don't effectively follow you. You're just their manager, and they just listen to what you're saying and go do their own thing because they think they'll have a better direction. And as a leader, especially in uncharted territory where we are, the path to success is not paved. And there are infinite possibilities in front of us. And the most important role as a leader is to pick the right direction and then inspire and convince people that that's the right path, especially by showing repeated examples that if you follow this, it will be path to success.
Yeah, I think there's a real discernment between leadership and followership, because followership, you use the word people choose, and we all have a choice where we go to work, the companies we work for, the leaders we want to work for, and there's something that you can't buy followership. It's a function of how you show up, the faith probably that people have in you, in the mission. So that I that followership piece, great leaders are chosen by their followers. I think that's, if I'm paraphrasing correctly, that really landed. And I think it's it's a rare thing to have followership, I believe. And
Yeah, and it's partly, it's inspiration, and it's partly demonstration that you are able to. I mean, maybe you meet someone for the first time and they're just so inspiring, and so okay, I'm going to give them a chance. But then if they show the path to success again and again and again, then you become their followers because they have demonstrated their leadership.
A leader once said to me, deliver on your promises, do what you say what you're going to do, and people build trust. And, we want to work for people we trust. And you were saying then it translates it into action, whatever your words are, like, otherwise they're just words on a piece of paper. You can have the best strategy, but if there is an execution behind that, then it becomes there's not a lot of worth in just words.
Correct. Absolutely.
And you've taken your company public. I believe it was in 2022. And how's your leadership style changed? I mean, I'm assuming that it has changed. It may not have done, but how has your approach changed now that you're managing a public company?
It has changed. And I compare it to the early days. And my style had a lot of influence from my upbringing. So my parents rarely reprimanded me. They just provided a lot of love and support, and that that made me want to be better. And I wanted to pursue excellence. Maybe I wanted to make them proud because I love them back, and that worked for me. Doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So in the early days of SoundHound, I mostly operated that way. I provided love and support. I didn't reprimand. And I got surrounded by people that succeeded that way because they wanted to prove excellence. But it didn't work for everyone. Some people need more than that. And then I had a realization that there's a difference between being demanding and reprimanding. And it's good to be demanding. And I became more demanding. And that generated the next wave of really, really good people and contributors around me. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA said something that, I don't like to fire people, I like to torture them to greatness. And that made a lot of sense. I torture you to greatness. And I've incorporated that. So just being demanding is working really well.
I torture them to greatness. That is one that I'm going to remember. And you said there's a difference between being demanding and reprimanding, and that is it's such a powerful quote. And I think it's so true. And it's knowing the difference between the two. And you can be demanding if people want to. If people want to achieve these extraordinary missions and visions and have the success that comes with that, well, then there's a certain work ethic and discipline and drive that's required to be on that journey.
Correct.
What keeps you awake at night?
I've been asked that before, so I've thought about it. So first, I sleep really well because I'm exhausted by the time I go to bed. and if I'm not exhausted, it means I didn't work hard enough that day. So I don't deserve to sleep. The honest answer sometimes is the excitement. Like if something is brewing that has so much potential, that excitement sometimes keeps me up. Just because I think about all the possibilities. But I think when people ask that question, they mean, what are you afraid of? And I have learned something. I've learned not to be afraid. And I read somewhere, and I don't know if it's true or not, that the number one reason people drown is because they give into fear. And you give into fear, then you don't act smart. and then you just drown and you panic. And that happens in life and in entrepreneurship. In entrepreneurship, it happens all the time, where something happens that seems scary. And I've had company meetings where I tell that story. It's like, don't be afraid, because if the moment you give into fear, you will drown. Just understand it. Understand this big force that just happened. Maybe a competitor did something, or something externally happened that seems very powerful. It may seem scary, but if you understand it, it can be an opportunity, right? A big wave can drown you, or you can ride it. And the bigger the wave, the bigger the ride. And that has happened so many times to us, where some people said, wow, we are doomed. And we turned that into the biggest inflection points on our journey.
I love that. There's so many things I keep saying I love, but I genuinely mean there's a big wave can drown you, or you can ride the wave. It depends on how you look at it, and also how you react in the moment. And you said it when you were talking about your sleep. That when you don't sleep, it's sometimes you've got an idea brewing and there's an excitement. And it took me I saw the picture. I think is your 5-year-old behind you in your picture. And I was like, it's that childlike excitement of like, before a birthday, of like, I know there's so much to come. And I really, and I relate to that. I think it's and actually it's a wonderful place to be, because it's possibility, it's potential. You said, I've learned not to be afraid. And we all have fears. I was curious, how have you learned not to be afraid? What did that process look like?
I've learned that it's possible to turn something that seems scary into something good. And I'll give you it's easier if I give you some examples. In 2015, we launched our voice AI platform, and we worked for 10 years in stealth to launch it, and it was great. When we showed it to people, it was amazing. It was ahead of its time. We have demos that went viral, got millions of views. And then a big tech company kind of copied it. Like very quickly, they copied it. They called us. I'm not going to mention their names, but they called us, asked some questions, and then they made a press release. A month or two later, I was very identical, and then they put a lot of force behind it. They had a fund that was funding startups to use it, and a lot of my colleagues said, this is it. We worked for 10 years. They copied us, and this is the end. Like, how are we going to compete with this? And it was scary. But then I thought, well, first of all, this is the big wave. Can you ride it, or can you let it drown you? As scary as they were, with all their might, they probably scared others too, other companies. So first of all, it created more mind share, so that was good for us. But then I went to companies that maybe were worried about this other big tech player, and I told them, the world is going to go into voice and AI, and you need an independent partner to be able to work with you. Otherwise, big tech players, they do everything, and they will build your products, and they will learn from it, and they will compete with you. So while they had a fund to fund startups, I created a fund for bigger companies to invest in us, to create an independent player that is powerful enough to create options. So I was able to use that force of the big mighty wave to ride it and raise a lot of money for SoundHound, and we used that money to internationalize. We only supported English. Then we started we had 30 languages. We created offices in multiple countries in Europe and Asia, and then some of these partners that invested in us became our customers, and it just ended up being such a good thing for us. But the day that we learned about it, it sounded like a scary big wave that was going to come and drown us. So I've learned, to answer your question, I've learned that something that might seem scary at first, study it, because there might be an opportunity here. It could be a good thing. And usually, if you look hard enough, you can find it.
It's taking that moment to, I suppose we're human beings, we're all emotional led, and some of us might panic, we all have a default state, but you can train your default state to be like, let me just pause, let me look for the opportunity here. And often those moments, those wave moments, they're real inflection points, aren't they? When we look back, they propel us to doing maybe something earlier or something on a different pathway that we might not have even considered before.
And the bigger they are, the bigger the opportunity for that inflection point. Absolutely.
It's a really interesting about when we just talked about, how we manage fear, because so much about it's mindset. I just tell you, we get to choose what mindset we bring to a situation if we just pause to see where we're on autopilot and actually what's the mindset that's the more helpful one to bring into the situation. So I love how you shared that. When you think about leadership, I asked at the beginning, what's some advice you've been given? And there are also things, it's a bit like where this question comes, like when I had my children, my first child, no, there's so many things no one warned me about. They told me about all the good things, the upsides. They didn't give me the reality of I'm not going to sleep for 6 weeks. It's going to feel pretty brutal. It's not the best time, but I will come through it. What is one thing no one warned you about when it came to entrepreneurship?
The first thing that comes to mind is what people did warn me about, which is it's a lonely job. Being a CEO is a lonely job, being a leader is a lonely job. But that's okay. I accepted that, and it doesn't have to be that lonely. You can always find your mentor, your partner to talk to and vent about. But something I learned on the job that no one told me about is that there are these very short moments that make it all worth it. So the majority of the time is really hard, right? You're working hard and it's just so hard and tiring and seems impossible at times. But then there are these moments that you succeed, or you leapfrog, or you're the best, or you create value, you make people happy. And those are so intensely rewarding that even though sometimes they last for like 10 seconds, it makes it all worth it. And then you go back to grinding and repeat.
What have been some of those short moments for you where it's been so palpable that this is all worth it?
It's like when someone who bet on me tells me they're happy with that bet. And it doesn't have to be like investors, of course, but people who chose to work with us, like when I'm at like a holiday event, and then somebody's spouse comes and says, "I'm really happy my wife or husband works at SoundHound. I'm really happy." Just that word, that is so rewarding that they chose, they had options. People have options, and they chose to work with at SoundHound, and then their family's happy, or they're happy with that choice. Or a customer who went through RFQ process, and they had 7 companies that bid, and they chose us, and then 6 months later they are happy, and we do an announcement together and give us a statement, and they talk about it. And those are short moments. Or when we have a benchmark where our technology is outperforming others by a big margin, and everybody's thinking, how did SoundHound do this? It's like magic. Those short moments really make it all worth it.
The small things really are the big things, aren't they? And you mentioned, and this is a common theme that I hear with entrepreneurs and leaders about the loneliness of leadership. And it's interesting because when you're at that, the CEO, you're not alone. There's many people around you, your board, your investors, your leadership team, family, and yet it can feel like a really lonely place. How do you deal with the loneliness that comes with the seat?
Um, well, part of it is just understanding and accepting it. Um, but it doesn't have to be that lonely. Um, I have obviously I've met to my wife a lot, so that's I have that to keep me balanced. And then at work, I have some colleagues like our CFO and COO, for example, and there are others where we just talk very openly. We are our own biggest critics. I mean, we have meetings that, like, if somebody listened to our meetings, like, are you guys okay? We just talk about how can we be better and why are we not, you know, better than this, and criticize ourselves again and again. And I think it's important to have that. You don't want to always be strong and tell everyone it's going to be okay. And sometimes you need to be a leader. Sometimes you need to be a partner, even to your colleagues. And the story I came up with was, if you're the pilot of a plane, and the plane, you lose an engine, and you have to do this really hard thing to land it with only one engine, or with no engine, let's say. First of all, you provide some transparency. You make an announcement, but you announce to the passengers that we lost an engine. You can see it by looking at the window, and we're gonna land. I know how to do this. It's possible, and I'm gonna land you guys. I'm gonna take you home, and don't worry, don't panic. So sometimes you need to be that kind of a leader. But sometimes you need to be more of a partner, right? So when I proposed to my wife, I told her, I can't promise that it's all going to be okay, but I promise you that I will always try for us. I will always try. And that's more of a partnership. And so you have to balance, when are you going to be the pilot? To tell everyone, don't worry, we're going to land and we're going to be okay, and the engine is smoke's coming out of it, because they can't do anything about it. You have to go land the plane for them. And sometimes you need to be that, a partner, like, guys, this is hard. We have to do this. We have to deliver it on time. You have to do some fundraising, and we have to cut costs, and we have to make this customer happy, and we have to make the impossible happen. And if you don't, it's going to be really bad. Sometimes you have to kind of bring them in so we can work together as partners. And finding that balance is really important. If you don't pivot to being a partner sometimes, then it's a really lonely job, and it's sad, and sometimes you fail, and then you're the only one to blame if it fails.
And that I really hear what you're saying there, and the pilot analogy. It's about transparency, isn't it? Because sometimes own the fact we've got an engine missing, because people want transparency. They want to get and when people operate from a place of clarity, they feel they're being you're giving them honest and real information. They might not like the journey. And equally, just remind them, to have confidence. Trust me. I know. I'm going to try and land this plane. I'm going to do my very best, because all companies are going to have tough times, tough moments, and I think it's really then what you do in those defining moments that really matter. And when leaders show up in that way, I think it builds such equity. It's that followership that we talked about.
Yeah.
And the partnership, well, that it's recognizing when you need to be that partner, and when you need to be the pilot. And I want to just ask you a question about measurement. There's a great saying. I think it's a great saying. But it's like, what gets measured improves. What we put our attention on expands. When you look at your business, and I think it's your business. Otherwise, it might be what you measure yourself personally. But what do you measure?
I really like that saying, by the way. What gets measured improves, um, and I really like it. We measure a lot of things. So for our tech, the notable things are, speed and accuracy, for example, of our technology. So are we faster than our competitors? Are we more accurate? So we are proud of where we are, but we are never satisfied. In the latest benchmark, for example, we are over 35% more accurate than our closest competitors. Our latency is 4 times better, and it's running at a lower cost. But we know we can do better, so you're never satisfied. In finance, we measure all the key performance indicators, revenue, margin, balance sheet, growth, obviously, stock performance. But the one thing that's really important to me personally is something I said earlier on this call, which is if someone had a choice and bet on us, are they happy in hindsight with their decision, right? And that can apply to, in many places, investors, employees, and customers. So investors that chose to invest in us, customers that chose to work with us, and employees who chose to work at this company. And are they happy in hindsight? I do measure that. I don't, some people close a deal and they forget about it. And the customers are unhappy 3 years later. Or sometimes people take the investor's money and then forget about it. But for me, it's really important. You take somebody's dollar, you want to be able to say, in hindsight, that was a really good investment. That was my best investment. That really is important to me.
I love that. It's not just a good investment. That was my best investment. That's such a good question for people to ask of themselves. And you said, I'm proud of where we're at, but I'm never satisfied. And that really speaks to that raising the bar that you mentioned. You use the word KPIs, and I saw this, I think, on LinkedIn recently, where they said, KPIs, but KPIs are our, key performance indicators, but it's keep people informed, keep people inspired, keep people invigorated. They had lots of different KPIs. And I was like, that's true. There are so many KPIs that are important to measure when it comes to people. I'd love to hear a little bit about SoundHound. I've spent time researching you, the company. It's extraordinary. But what do people need to know? What would people be interested to know about SoundHound?
SoundHound is a voice and conversational AI company. We believe that speaking is the most natural way to interact with devices and services. Right? So my 5-year-old, the first thing she learned was talking. Like we have to teach her how to use a keyboard at some point, or like touch screen or a mouse, and to learn to deal with technology. But she knows how to speak and listen to things. And actually, she's going around the house and trying to talk to every object. Not everything listens, but we think ultimately every device will have a voice AI interface. And fortunately for these product creators, all they need is a microphone that's very small, it's very inexpensive. You don't need a touch screen, you don't need expensive equipment or hardware, just a small microphone. And a partner like SoundHound, we provide a white label under your brand voice assistant for your product. We are big in cars and TVs and like millions of cars and TVs, but ultimately every IoT device, tens of billions of IoT devices, can have their own voice assistants. And then the second thing we do is AI customer service. We believe AI customer service will be as necessary for every business, just like Wi-Fi and electricity, right? You create a business, you sign up for internet, you sign up for electricity, you make a website, you sign up for AI customer service. That day will come, and users will prefer dealing with AI because there's no wait time, it's very capable, it's very patient. And we create AI customer service for business of all sizes, like from 7 of the top 10 financial institutions, large enterprise brands in insurance and healthcare and so on, all the way to a single location restaurant, single location barbershop. And we have different flavors of our technology for different sectors. And we are in hundreds of large enterprises. We are in over 10,000 merchant locations, something that we saw 20 years ago, and it's finally happening.
And I remember when you were at University of Stanford. Am I right? I think you did a PhD in voice. Was it in voice and AI? This is a couple of
machine learning and speech recognition. Yes.
And at that time, when you could see this, again, for all intents and purposes, unmet future, and you shared your vision of what the world was going to become, how did people respond to you then?
So I wanted to be a technical founder to a very high-tech company that would make a big impact. And I was inspired by science fiction. Like, I asked myself, what do we have in science fiction that we don't have in real life, because that's the big impact. And if you watch like Star Trek, they have so many things that we don't have, and what we think is normal. They have like replicators and teleportation devices and spaceships that go faster than light. But the one that I thought would happen for sure in my lifetime was voice AI. So we would talk to robots and computers. They talk back. We have a conversation. We ask them questions. We ask them to do things. They're intelligent. And I thought that's going to happen for sure in my lifetime, and it would be a big change in our life. And I wanted to be part of that transformation. So I chose my PhD thesis to be in that area. And I went to do fundraising. I actually said it's going to be 20 years. I said in 20 years, we are going to talk to computers, and I want to raise funding to do it. And at that time, most investors said that 20 years is too long, right? Our fund may not exist in 20 years. What can you do in 3 years? So I had to find a way to show milestones and products along the way that would generate value I went through an interesting path to be able to do 10 years of R&D, finally unveil our engine back in 2015.
And back then, could you predict the success that this sound had? You said there was 10 years of stealth mode. Investors were like, we don't know if we're going to be around in 20 years time. Could you have predicted where you're at now if you kind of transport yourself back to having finished your PhD?
I think it goes back to the having faith kind of thing. Definitely, I could visualize being very successful and very impactful. But the path that got us here, absolutely not. I mean, all the pivots that we had to do, and the things that happened, the things that we did, and the things that happened outside of our four walls that we took advantage of to get to where we are, absolutely, I couldn't predict it. But I had this long-term vision that it is going to happen for sure, and I could see that we need a couple of more breakthroughs in computing, in technology, and I think at the pace of, you look at Moore's law and everything else is going to happen. So I was able to put it together that this is kind of a 20-year vision, and sometimes it doesn't happen to people. Like, if you might have a really good vision and you're too early. And the intersection doesn't happen. Like, you need to have an intersection between technology capability and the demand for the technology, right? And I'll give you two examples. Autonomous driving, I think the demand is there. It's been there for a long time, but technology, I think, is getting close now, but most of the last few years, it just wasn't quite ready. So you don't get the intersection. The opposite example is virtual reality. I think the first time I put an Oculus on my head was so many years ago, and it was amazing. So I thought the technology was there, but we're not seeing mass adoption yet. So I haven't figured out how to make this easy to be part of your life so that you get the mass adoption. But I think voice AI, we are fortunate that it's happening, right? So the technology is finally really good. It's like Star Trek good. It wasn't until 3 years ago, but finally it is. And people want it. So we are fortunate that in our lifetime, the intersection is happening to something that we had the vision 20 years ago. We worked towards it. A lot of contribution came from us. A lot of it came from others, but we are able to run a really successful business with it.
And if you look back over the last 20 years, what have been some of the bright spot moments where you're like, you know what, we're on the right path?
We went through different phases. The first was just building the tech, and the first 5 to 7 years of it was it seemed hard. Like there were so many moments that people said this is not going to work, and then you had breakthroughs that wow, look at this, we can do something that others cannot do, and that gives you um, the energy to keep going. Um, so we had that moment on the tech, and then we had it on business, like because then it's okay, let's go and sell this now to companies, and initially it was people were not opening the door. You knock on the doors, and um, I remember one of the first meetings, somebody said, "Do you really think people want to talk to their toasters?" And very discouraging, right? But I think nobody says that anymore because yeah, of course we're going to talk to our toasters and microwaves and washing machines and everything. We can talk to it, right? It's not a big deal. And there was a moment where we were winning POC budgets, and then we started winning IT budgets, right? So you win a POC budget from a company that is more forward-looking. They have an innovation budget on the side. So let's just see what is possible. You win those, and those don't scale. And now you're winning IT budgets because there's a company that has a mandate to go through its AI transformation, and they know they are going to spend a lot of money, and they're going to choose a partner, and then they knock on our door, and they knock on our door now. And then so that was a big transformation. So we had it in our technology, and then now we have it in the business.
And those bright spot moments, how do you celebrate those?
Very short. They're very short. Like I said, we have these like short moments, like maybe 5-10 seconds. And it's dangerous to celebrate for too long, right? Because you close your eyes and then the world passes by. So it just we do a high five and then we keep going. We had there was a moment where we had 100 million users of our technology. Like 100 million people had used our technology, and we had cake. We just had cake. We had a cake with 100 million. Everybody came for like 10 minutes. We clapped and everybody had a little cake, and then went back to work. So they're very short.
Short, and you're still making those moments to celebrate.
We do. We acknowledge them, and it also tells us that we are on the right path. Right? So we can keep going. We can go faster.
And if you look ahead, so we've just had the last 20 years. If I was to speak to you in, I don't know if it's 1 year, 5 year, I don't even know what the right time scale is, but at a future moment in time, and you can tell me what that future moment in time is, what does ultimate success look like for you? What is the ultimate goal?
This is an AI disruption. So I've seen multiple disruptions in my life. There was the .com, the internet, and then there was the mobile, social, and then mobile. And anytime there was a disruption, some new leaders emerged, and the world changed. And they were all, mostly positive. The world changed and became more positive. There's always some dangers that come with this transformation, and now we are in the AI transformation. I think it's going to be bigger than the previous ones, and it's just starting. Some people say, are we in a bubble? And I say, absolutely not. It's just the beginning of it. And I want SoundHound to be one of the leaders in AI, in this AI disruption, a major force in it, a major contributor in it. Of course, that comes with a bigger market cap and bigger revenue and all that. But those are just the consequence of just being a major force in this AI transformation and creating long-term value for the world, and that keeps us going.
And long-term value, for the world. I mean, we're playing big here. This is about impacting the world. And before we move into a very quick fire round, when I was doing my research, there was a wonderful article by Fortune who talked about your time at Stanford, how you'd worked with NVIDIA and Jensen Huang, and I'm just love to hear about that, a little bit about that relationship. What did it teach you? Because obviously there was something that he saw in you where he knew that the success that was to come for you.
Well, the biggest thing I learned from NVIDIA was that they their journey was long and hard. So was ours. And you read about how NVIDIA went out of business like 3 times almost, or even more. But look at them now. And I think our story is very similar. We had this vision that took a long time. We knew it was going to take a long time, and we had a vision. We were not trying to make quick money or anything. We were trying to create value. Like, we wanted to innovate, make the next generation of AI technology, and it was a long journey. It was a hard journey. There were lots of moments where people said, "You're not going to make it," but we did. And every time we use NVIDIA as an inspiration. Like, look at them now and look at those stories, and we can do it.
Yeah, it's good to have examples, isn't it, of companies who've been there and done it. Because again, we all need inspiration at times, because it can be tough, to your point. It can be hard, and people can doubt us, and actually seeing that others have done it and borrowing a little bit of that inspiration can be very additive. So I was going to do what I was going to do. I'd love to do just a very quick fire round of several questions. There's no right or wrong answer, not a competition, just to hear more about you. You're such an incredibly, we just use the word inspiring, such an inspiring, I was going to say leader, entrepreneur, but I'm going to go human being, because to me that, human being at the very core. And my first question is, what is a quality you most value in others?
Integrity, absolutely integrity. And I think there is a triangle balance between 3 nodes of ambition, capability, and integrity. So you can increase your ambition, which is a good thing, but then you can go 2 ways. You can elevate your capabilities to meet your ambition, or you can decrease your integrity. And I really care about integrity. Just push your capability. If you are aiming high, you need to catch up to it by being more capable, as opposed to, and I see some people sacrifice their integrity to get there.
Okay, so integrity, ambition, and capability, but integrity being a quality you most value. Your dream job outside of what you're doing now?
Technical innovator. I'm an engineer, and inventing is things that are really hard to do, that look like magic. Like, people say, "Well, how do you do it?" That really, really gives me joy.
I love that. I had a magician over for my birthday recently, and I love that. How do you do it? Because it just leaves me in just such a anything is possible, and it's sleight of hand. And but anyhow, a superpower you would love to have, and why?
Being better at predicting the future. And I'm not saying I want to see the future. I want to predict the future based on the information I have. And if I become better at it, I think that is kind of like a superpower.
I think we could say you're doing a pretty good job of that already. But again, to your point, there's always room for betterment. So what is the legacy you want to leave behind?
I want to create value for the world, and I don't want to create value just for myself at the expense of others. You can take an apple from your neighbor. You have one more apple, they have one less. But if you make a glowing sun, everybody can light their candles. And that's the type of value I want to create.
I love that. One thing you can't work without?
Peace and stability. And I'm lucky to live in a very peaceful and loving home. And the moment that is disturbed a little bit, that I can't work without it, I can't live without it.
Yeah. A great book or a Netflix show that you've watched or book you've read in the last year?
There was a Netflix documentary called Life on Our Planet. I really enjoyed it. It was well made and a big lesson. I mean, you can just be entertained just watching it, but a big lesson of it is that the world was ruled by these giant dinosaurs, and the mammals that also existed, they were just hiding in their shadows. But now those dinosaurs don't exist anymore, and the mammals are ruling the planet, and that can change again. And I think that's the big lesson.
And you mentioned your father earlier on. If we were to ask, your parents what they're most proud of, what would they say?
That I didn't give up when it was hard, and that's one of the strengths of SoundHound. There were many moments in our history that the most rational choice was to throw in the towel, but for us, failure was never an option.
I love this. This has been the most extraordinary conversation. Um, it, I mean, I would love to just now share my best bits but I've written 3 pages of notes, as you can see, so I'm not even sure where to. You're an extraordinary leader, an extraordinary entrepreneur, and there are so many nuggets of wisdom, these bite-sized pieces that are going to have such a profound impact. And you talked about changing the world, and you are, and it's just such a privilege to be here with you, listening to how you're doing that. So thank you for gifting us your time. And these lessons are evergreen. They are going to have such a ripple in the world. So I truly thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me and all the great questions that you asked.
Thank you, Keyvan.